In partnership with USAEBN, Zeta Talk and the Zeta Report will be discussing the challenges of living on a planet beset with change, rising seas, increasing earthquakes and volcanic activity, weather gone wild, and the worry of what to do in the worst-case scenario. We will also inject Zeta Talk prophecy on what is coming next and advice on readiness plans and safe locations. Whenever Zeta Talk is quoted, please remember that prophecy is not fact, it is opinion. It only becomes fact when it happens. The Zetas are remarkably accurate, but have been wrong on occasion. Bear that in mind. For more information on this subject, please visit zetatalk.com or the Zeta Report on YouTube.
Welcome to Situational Preparedness here on USA Emergency Broadcasting Network. We're live every Monday at 4 p.m. Central Time, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And this Monday, as the first Monday of the month, we do have Nancy from Wisconsin calling us, and we're calling this show, as we go forward, the Zeta Report on USA Emergency Broadcasting Network. I would like to introduce myself first, bad host today. My name is Andre. I'm with USAEBN as well as Madtown Preppers, and I'd like to welcome to the show Nancy from ZetaTalk.com for our first edition of the official Zeta Report on USAEBN.
Yeah, hi Andre. Yeah, hi.
Hi. Welcome back.
Same session, different title. It's the same,
exactly.
except we're going to refer to the Zetas predictions, prophecy, or as we phrase it, opinion or theory. In other words, we're going to differentiate when we get into Zeta Talk predictions to make clear that this is not fact, like the size of an earthquake or the time the sun came up, or, that's factual. But we're going to differentiate and call it in the opinion of the Zetas, just so you are braced for it. Unlike some shows, the ones that I do, and produce little YouTube videos, I rattle off and say, the Zetas say, the Zetas say, the Zetas say. We're saying in the opinion of the Zetas. That's because USAEBN is grounded, fact-oriented, and I am being hosted by USAEBN.
Right. As a partnership with you, Nancy, you've done, I think this will be your 6th or 7th show that we've done on USAEBN, and we've covered a lot of ground, starting with off-grid solutions, going into mindset and Earth changes, 3,600-year signature, kind of building to what is causing all these changes. And discussing with the people at USAEBN that we work with, we decided to bring you on officially as a partner, but also with that partial disclaimer that we played at the beginning of the program, not necessarily to show that we don't support what Zeta Talk is doing, but more so to say that this is opinion and prophecy. Some of these things have come true, which go back to the Zeta Talk accuracy, which we can talk about later as well. But we here at the network believe in our listeners and our users should research everything before you believe anything. And the link to Zeta Talk is zetatalk.com, and also another website, poleshift.ning.com, poleshift.ning.com. So go and get that out there for our listeners.
So,
Nancy, I'm sorry.
Yes, hi. Very good. So this month I wanted to talk about disasters pending for North America. It's something that we've sort of touched on in the past, but until I was able to say, in the opinion of the Zetas, blah, 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 it's a little difficult to talk fully about what the Zetas predict for North America without saying, and after the pole shift, here's where the new equator will be. This is not fact-based, this is prophecy. So now that we've got that sorted out, here we go. And in the news this past week, it's been strong earthquakes in the Eastern Caribbean, and I'm talking about a 6.5 that happened on July 16th. Well, it's probably even a little bit more than 6.5, but it was on the very eastern edge of the Caribbean plate. So you could see that it had to do with the plate doing something, lifting, moving, whatever. Also, Kikimjeni, the volcano near Grenada, activated again, and there were tsunami warnings that came out as a result of this for Grenada and surrounding islands. Kikimjeni is a submarine a volcano that means underwater, and that happened on the 24th of July. And then just ahead of all that, on July 8th, we're talking about boom, 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 1 week after another. On July 8th, we had Jamaica have seawater flow in on its southern side. They called it, well, high tides, blah, blah, blah. But the fact that it was on the southern side and not the northern side is significant. Why? Because the Zetas, in the opinion of the Zetas, and the prophecy of the Zetas, who predicted plate movements, they said the Caribbean plate would tilt. It would be pushed down just above South America, and by a rolling of South America, which would put its top like a giant ice cream cone. The top would tilt over to the left toward the Pacific, and as it did so, because there's a hump near Venezuela, that hump would ride over the Caribbean plate, pushing it down, causing it to tilt, the northern part a little higher, the southern part lower, and that would account for what was described in Jamaica. So we've had that happen. Now, that's not the only thing that hit the news very, very recently. There was an article in big media spread, the New Yorker magazine and other media pieces talking about the Cascadia subduction zone, and that is Washington, Oregon, around Seattle, that area where the Juan de Fuca plate snugs up against the West Coast. And they said, oh, the big one is going to hit. And it's going to be just terrible, like 8 or 9, and it's going to be so bad that, and they quoted someone in FEMA saying, we are assuming that everything west of I-5 is going to be toast. That's the way it was quoted by New Yorker. Everything west of I-5 is going to be toast. Now, if you have a map and take a look at I-5, that's quite a bit. I mean, we're not talking about a major highway that hugs the coastline. It's in, I don't know, 100 miles in, but they're basically they're saying that the tsunamis and the subduction, and they said, would all the volcanoes that run around the Cascadia range would explode due to forced subduction, of the Juan de Fuca, and that would cause the rock to melt, as they put it, and explode the volcanoes, and therefore you'd have tsunami and hot earth and, earthquake damage.
Volcanic ash.
Yeah, and it was going to be a mess. Now, they didn't give any kind of a time frame on this at all, just there it is. We think the big one is going to hit over here, right?
Right.
So this all has caused Andre and I, to consider that we should discuss, North American disasters pending, particularly because in the opinion of the Zetas, it's not the West Coast that's going to go first. It's going to be the New Madrid. They have regularly stated that the New Madrid is going to start its activity, and that'll be magnitude 6 and 7 earthquakes, and maybe some 8s, and then finally the big one in the New Madrid. And as all this is progressing, the San Andreas fault line will hiccup and do some hiccuping. We're talking 6 and magnitude 6 and 7 and that type of thing. But it's only after the New Madrid has completed its violent and full adjustment will the New Madrid, in a domino fashion, start adjusting. And then you may see the Juan de Fuca plate, causing volcanoes up there to go off. Now, what does the New Madrid mean, and what is our history of the New Madrid fault line? Well, in 1811 to 1812, that's when it last went off. Now, in those days, we had log cabins. We didn't Memphis and cities like St. Louis, etc. They weren't what they are today. It was relatively underpopulated. But what is of record is that the Mississippi ran backwards in certain places briefly. Church bells rang in Boston, and well, you say, how can that be? Well, there's a sister fault line. The New Madrid runs up and down along the Mississippi. Then it curves just south of Chicago and runs under the Great Lakes, and it runs on up along the Seaway. There's a sister fault line that connects down in the Gulf, or where the New Madrid touches the Gulf. They're not real sure just exactly where, but that's where it connects. And it rolls through Alabama and curves up and runs along the eastern side of the Appalachian Mountains all the way up to Connecticut. That's where the church bells rang in Boston. Now, coincidentally, there was an earthquake swarm in Connecticut in that area. And this happened, I believe, in 2015, within this year. CBS had Mikao Kaku, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, on, and the talking heads were saying, Mikao, what does this mean? And he said, well, I think it's New Madrid related. And the talking heads got an ashen face and said, oh, can't you give us some good news? Well, he's absolutely right. It is New Madrid related. We're having quake swarms all up and down the New Madrid, and all the way over into Oklahoma had a quake swarm, and the like. Now, why would the New Madrid be vulnerable? What is it about our continent and the way the rock strata is laid out that would make the New Madrid vulnerable? Well, it's along a river, for one thing, and even that quake swarm that happened in Oklahoma, if I'm not mistaken, that was on a riverbed, and dropping down. Why are riverbeds vulnerable to this type of ripping or trembling or shaking? Well, they're weak spots in the crust. If you think about it, if the crust is like a floating raft on the magma of the earth. It's solid rock floating on the magma. If it's thick, it has, but where it's thin, it's going to sag. And if it sags, that's where the water is going to flow. Water seeks its level. It always flows down. And the riverbed is there because the crust was thin and it sagged, and therefore it collected water. So you have a Mississippi River with weak crust, and why would it rip? In the opinion of the Zetas, when they were describing plate movement, outside of what history teaches us, as we have covered in prior USAEBN broadcasts, plate movement history. You can see that the west coast of the U.S. and the Andes is a subduction zone. You can see that some places are pulling apart, like the Seaway is pulling apart, or the African Rift Valley, etc. You can determine that, sinking land, rising land. But what happens when, as Pangea continues to separate, and the Atlantic pulls apart and the Pacific compresses, you have this, that happens right around the equator, the fat part of the globe. Why doesn't North America move as a whole, when the Atlantic pulls apart? This is determined by the shape of North America. It's a flat top. If you take a look at it, from the North Pole, and take a look at the shape of the North America, it's rounded as it comes down the Atlantic. It rounds under the tip of Mexico. It rounds as it comes up along the San Andreas. It has a few fingers coming out near Alaska. part of Japan is part of the plate, and Kamchatka, etc. But mainly, it's a flat top. Well, a flat top can't roll. It's frozen in place. So what happens when the Atlantic pulls apart and widens is that Mexico, the tip of Mexico, is being pushed into the Pacific, and this creates a bowing tension in North America. Up in the Aleutian Islands and the tip of Mexico are being pulled toward each other, and the center part of the bowl, which is San Diego, etc., is stuck in the middle. So popping water mains and gas mains in San Diego, deep crevasses, like Mexico has had some amazingly deep crevasses that just rip open, and appear overnight, and they go down they don't go down to the middle of the earth, but they look like they would. Even Arizona has had some of that. We've had sinkholes appearing, train derailments where the trains just go in front of the driver. Sometimes they even get photos of this. This is what the conductor on the train was looking at, is and the track, gets all jiggy because there's all this bowing stress. And Philadelphia, around Pennsylvania, if you take San Diego and go through the United States, that's where the center of the bow is. They've had an awful lot of derailments, water main breaks and the like. So even the St. Lawrence Seaway is under tension to pull apart, which it has done in the past, due to this bowing stress. So I wanted to point out, yes?
Quick question on the New Madrid and the fact that it does stretch through the St. Lawrence Seaway, the St. Lawrence River passage. That is a continuous fault zone, correct, from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up to, say, Nova Scotia?
Yeah, they have, geologists have mapped the New Madrid fault line. And it runs from south of, pretty much down there in touching the Gulf where the Mississippi empties all the way up, follows the Mississippi until we get somewhere underneath Chicago where it leaves the Mississippi, and it's following rock strata. And I'm not sure how they mapped all this out, but it runs just south of the Seaway through the Illinois, Indiana, through Ohio, and approaching the New England states, but it kind of peters out at some point up there. But it does make that curve, and it is related to rock strata, that different rock strata will separate, and that's the fault line, instead of being one big cohesive chunk of rock, I guess, however that might be put.
My other point I wanted to flesh out quick would be that the New Madrid is a ripping fault. It's not like the subduction fault that we were talking about in Cascadia, the Juan de Fuca coming into the North America plate, is one plate going under another plate, whereas the New Madrid is more of the stress is on one side, the Atlantic side pulling away, and then the Pacific side more towards Alaska pulling away, and then it's going to rip apart. It's not going to go under each other or slide so much. It's just going to separate, correct? I mean, that's the predictions of what has happened before.
Yeah, and I think that in the opinion of the Zetas, it's not strictly a big what happened before, which might have been interpreted as shaking, shock. People were thrown to the ground, the chimneys flew off the houses, and they describe a jolt. But what they're describing is an adjustment in the bowing tension. And what that means is that the North American plate is being pulled at a diagonal. It is because it's fixed on the top, the northeast part of up there not by Quebec and New England states and etc., is being pulled toward the northeast, and down in Mexico in the southwest of the United States is being pulled to the southwest, and that diagonal tension is adjusted when the New Madrid rips. The northeast will actually move northeast. The whole Florida, Appalachians, all whoop, a little, and the whole to the west of the Mississippi, and Mexico, etc., will go to the southwest, and so we have a separation at the Mississippi. The Zetas have predicted, and this is their opinion, that the bridges of the Mississippi will all, when the big one hits there, not some of these little ones necessarily, but the big one, which would probably be magnitude 9, up there, right? The bridges are going to rip, and how can they not? And what's more, to the land just to the west of the Mississippi, this is prophesied that it will drop for a width of maybe 50 miles. It'll lose some elevation due to lack of support. We got this sagging crust where the river goes. When it rips, the sagging crust is going to sag more, have even less support. So that, wow, the distribution up, what goes across the Mississippi, I have to tell you, one biggie is gas and oil. The foundries in Texas, around the Houston, etc. And I've seen the maps, that show where the major oil and gas pipelines are. Oh dear, they all cross the Mississippi. They may be under a bridge, or they may be side by side with a bridge, or maybe I don't know, but they will rip. And there we are with everything east of the Mississippi, saying, whoops, where's our fuel oil, where's our gasoline? And it'll have to come by boat around the East Coast. It's just going to be a very awkward situation, a lot worse than I need my diapers and baby milk or whatever might be the case. And it not only the church bells in Boston, but it run up and down the East Coast, and the East Coast is a lot more developed now than it was in 1811 and 12. I took a vacation some 20 years ago to Savannah and Charleston, and lovely, old towns, with these little protected courtyards and stucco houses, and I said, isn't this odd? You keep seeing these bolts along the side of the house, and you go to the other side of the house and there's these bolts, and what is that for? Well, it turns out that after the New Madrid adjustment in 1811 and 12, these buildings were so, whacked that they had to put metal rods from one side to the other with plates, on the outside of the house with bolts, tighten those bolts to pull the house back together. And there it stands. So it was not that minor. It ran up and down the East Coast for sure. Now, what about all those cities? We love to hug our coastlines. We love the beaches, etc. But the development is a lot further along, than it was in those days. A lot more housing. So it's not just Memphis. It's not just, St. Louis. Chicago is going to be badly rattled, in the opinion of the Zetas. And Ohio will be Cleveland, etc. The New Madrid runs through there, So according to the Zetas, we're going to have lots and lots of cities that are going to be rattled by quakes and have collapsed buildings. And then we have all that oil and gas distribution that's going to be potentially wrecked if the Zeta prophecy comes true. So why should we take that seriously? Well, consider Jade Helm 15 and the closing of the Walmart 5. Now, people, conspiracy theorists, as they like to say, are going nuts over this. Obama's going to declare martial law. What does this mean? And they're going to take all our guns away. Well, one thing that should be noted, and the Zetas were quick to point out in their observation, hey, doesn't it have some relationship to the lower part of the New Madrid, which is soft rock? If you look at the rock stratas from Memphis on north, the rock is firmer, and from Memphis south, it's newer rock, it's softer. What's more, look at Bayou Corne in Louisiana. For those who are not familiar with that, there is a salt dome, I think they call them, in which oil has been stored as part of the reserve for the U.S. They pump out the salt water and they pump in the oil, and then they don't have to run above ground and find. Anyway, it's cheap natural storage, temporary, so that we have extra oil in case Saudi Arabia cuts us off or something like that, and then we have reserves. So, oh heavens, here's oil on the surface, and the big, they called it a sinkhole, where the land kept dropping and dropping, and all this oil was kept bubbling up, and then there was gasoline fumes that were blowing over into Texas, and they had sparking telephone lines, where they would be like lightning is struck, but there's no lightning, where it burst into flame on the top of the pole. And the Zetas were asked about this, and they said, well, isn't there eyes burning and that type of thing acrid? Well, it's fumes in the air from Bayou Corne being blown over there, and then when it hits the electrical lines, etc., it flashes. So this was in the air. They were having to move people. They were, claiming that everything was fine. There was no danger to the populace, and it kept sinking and sinking. All right, that's where the New Madrid, touches down there, where the East Coast fault line comes wrapping out. But it and then there's another thing that happened in the Four Corners area recently, in the last few months. And this was in the news, and there it was, at the Four Corners, there's a strong methane measure, and the U.S. was scratching their head saying, why? Why do we have this methane? And it was, well, there's no cities there, there's not a dump, it's not a landfill, there's no cows, farting away, or the typical things. So what is this all about? And the Zetas were asked their opinion. They said, look at where the Continental Divide is. Son of a gun, it ran right there, touching the Four Corners area, etc. And they said when you have the Continental Divide on a subduction zone, being, the Pacific comes pushing under, the Continental Divide keeps moving to the east. It once was on the coastline and moves to the east. Mountain building happens. That when that happens, rock tumbles over vegetation, and the vegetation is trapped under that rock. But under the influence of the bowing of the North American plate, there is that rock and that's on top is separated enough that the methane happens. It does not need oxygen to progress. The rotting vegetation produces methane without oxygen. That's why it happens like under the permafrost and blah blah blah. And so therefore it's coming up because of the bow. And sure enough, that's more or less, if you run the bow from San Diego, LA area, marching across the continent toward Philadelphia or Pennsylvania, it kind of marches through that area. That's where the bow tension is the worst. So, an interesting point that the Zetas brought out, and I noticed when the correlation, that when they were asked to describe safe locations in Denver itself, high up in the mountain or the eastern part of Denver, in particular where it tumbles down into the plains, etc., they gave, I want to read this as an example of why people read Zeta Talk. And by the way, Velikovsky also noted that in subduction, that you have this pushing over the plains that goes on. And Velikovsky mentioned in his book Earth in Upheaval that Chief Mountain was pushed 8 miles across the plains, and exactly how he determined that, or the scientists determined that, I don't know. But it is of note that it's not that radical a thought, right? Now, this is Zeta Talk, and remember, this is an opinion, and they're talking about the hour of the pole shift, which is a crustal shift, which they have predicted, which of course has not happened yet, and caused by Nibiru's passage. And the Zetas say, we have stated that mountain building will not occur in Colorado as it has in the past, but rather that the mountains will push over the plains to the east. Mountain building occurs when a rock layer pushes under another, tumbling and shattering the top layer. The current continental divide in Colorado has so many layers of rock beneath it that what is pushing under can no longer jumble the top layer. Instead, the whole mess pushes east over the plains. Colorado rapidly drops in elevation to the east of the high mountains, and it is the land in lower elevations for a 50-mile swath that will find itself rumpled and tossed before what appears to be mountains on the move. As surprising as it may seem, this process does not kill all life before it, but rather a rough ride where roads rumple, cars are tossed to their sides, and housing collapses. This is expected in any case during great quakes. Afterwards, the rumpled area will find itself looking down upon lands that were formerly on the same level, and survivors will realize what has happened. This process has likewise occurred during prior pole shifts. Thus, safety in Colorado might entail being to the west of the continental divide rather than to the east. Now, that's the end of my quote from Zeta Talk. Who would have thought that? That's the last thing I would have said. As a human, I would have said, oh, yeah, get up in the high mountains and, that's got to be safer than, one of the things they've said is that salt flats are very rigid and they don't snap. I would have gone to Utah and sat on the salt flats, but I would never have said, be just to the west of the continental divide, where I would have assumed rock. I would say out in the plains would be the safer place, and they're saying,
right.
Not if you're close to the continent. So this is a type of interesting insight or suggestion from the Zetas, which is why people thunder into the Zeta Talk website and read it in the Safe Locations documentation. Just a click on the left-hand side in the menu. Now, I've been talking nonstop, Andre. Did you want to jump in with anything?
Yeah, I've got one question that comes up a lot when I'm talking to folks in my own day-to-day activities or my other job or what have you. Try to explain preparations and safe locations to folks with, folks that are unfamiliar with the ZetaTalk.com website or the pole shift NING. The question I get quite a bit is, why should a person that's looking to be prepared for upcoming disasters, let's say they're a preparedness person or a prepper, why should they trust the Zetas over, say, NASA or USGS or Fox News or mainstream media or whoever? What kind of accuracy percentage does the Zeta Talk?
Yeah, I used to say. Thanks. I used to say, oh, they're 100% accurate, but I can't say that because they said that the pole shift will happen shortly after May 15th, 2003, and where we did indeed track Nibiru according to the Zeta Talk coordinates in 2001 and 2 and 3. And boy, I think we went over that. Has Nibiru, well, maybe not, but I know I've got that on my website, and in fact, the Zetas at the start of Zeta Talk, they gave the coordinates in 1995 or 1997 it was. They said, okay, here's where it's going to be, blah, 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 in 2000, 2001, and what. And all the way to 2003, and they had that, what they call the right angle and the declination. Precise, number and dozen different numbers past the decimal point, So it wasn't sloppy, like more or less wave of the hand, where it came around the left-hand side of Orion up toward the ecliptic and then circled around and plunged back down toward the right-hand side of Orion. From our view from Earth, that's where we would see it. So people started tracking in 2001, and we had observations people went to observatories in France, in the U.S., in Flagstaff, and up in Vancouver. And they found something that was not on the star charts, that was at those coordinates. Now, you can only see Orion in the winter months, from the northern hemisphere. Otherwise, it's in the sun, so basically you can't turn a telescope, not from an observatory, maybe fancy NASA probes can do that, but the glare of the sun precludes looking at Orion, except for like 3-4 months in the winter. So the next year was infrared year, and we had a skeptic in Florida that said, okay, I've gone and taken an image, of where the Zeta said it would be, and here it is, and Nancy, where's your object? And the Zetas had me, put my finger on it, essentially, an X, and said there, and son of a gun, there was an object like a dim star that was not on the star charts. So we had a group in the same thing back in Vancouver. I think, I can't remember just exactly what, but we had France, U.S. teams, and we had a team in Vancouver also. And there was a woman who wanted to go to South Africa and had rented the scope there. It was the best scope, in Africa, basically. And she was a chemist, and she and her co-worker went down there. And when they got there, because the word had gone out that this team was doing this, and it's a big cover-up about Nibiru, and said, don't let her take a look, So she was turned away when she got there. And she said, but I have this letter here, this confirmation. Oh, no, turned away. She wrote to me later and said she went back to Zaire and with another observatory took a look and got it in infrared at the Zeta Tau coordinates. And so did they in France. As a matter of fact, in France, it was an astronomer, Nuchel Shuttle or something, the name of the observatory, old man, and he said, "Wow!" He and his daughter, and they were all excited, and the crew up there in France, and said, "Look, we think it's a star about to go nova. It's emitting what they termed waves." And we begged to get the image, and the observatory refused to release it. Okay, so all right, the next year was getting closer, and people in the U.S., the team, rented CCD images in near somewhere in Arizona. I can't remember. I don't believe it was. But in any case, they paid the money out, right? And they were able to manipulate the scope, and it was an amateur scope, but of high quality. I mean, you had to pay money to rent it. And every 2 weeks, they would take images of where the Zeta Tau coordinates. And this thing was moving. The dim star would be at the coordinates, and then the following week it would be where it was supposed to move to, and when they went back to where it was gone. So it was a moving object. And they began to see the tail, the brightness of the tail, because this is a vast charged tail that reflects light. And then by March of 2003, it was visible in the evening, just after the sunset, and I myself saw it in March 26, 2003, and people all over the world did. All right, so we tracked it in. Believe it or not, this is all of record, and I have that on my Nancy Leader YouTube account as the most recent edition. 10,000 people have looked at it so far, but and it details that, and briefly in a 3-minute thingy. So But there's other things, like I was just describing how the Caribbean seems to be moving in the manner that the Zetas have predicted. Nobody else predicted this. And they've predicted what we call the Earth wobble, where because of Nibiru coming close, it pushes the globe's North Pole away, and then later in the day, or 12 hours later, the magnetic North Pole can bounce back. So it has, if you were up above the North Pole, you would see a figure eight being formed. Well, people have, and this started in 2004, and I was able to, I had a team of people around the world that were very reliable, and I thought, what's the azimuth of where your sun rose, and where was it expected, and where, and and you could tell this figure eight, and they were tracking that. So why did the Zetas predict some of the things that they did, like increase drought and deluge, the blending of the seasons where you have snow in summer, and that's in process. We're not there yet, but the weather has gotten so erratic, and drought and deluge more severe, temperature swings more severe, deep ocean whirlpools and tides and tornadoes happening where they've never happened before in irregular places, blah, blah. That's Zeta Talk accuracy. Well, it was related to the fact that they knew this Earth wobble would start, and would start in 2004, so way back in 1995 to 2004, they were making these predictions. And the reason that that's accurate is because they knew the Earth wobble would start, and it did. So these are just some examples. But what we get from NASA is all very well and good, but there has been a cover-up over the presence of Nibiru since the days of Reagan, and Roswell, etc. And they went in 1983 and found Nibiru coming in, in the direction of Orion, and there was a big cover-up that started. It hit the Washington Post front page in December 31st, 1983, toward the bottom, there it is, the article, that they found something, could even be a member of our solar system, something out there. And, and what one guy says, it's not inbound, I can tell you that. Well, if they don't know what it is, they can't tell you it's not inbound, And they were worried about panic, so the big cover-up started. You can see this now. I mean, people are seeing two suns rising or two suns setting on occasion when the sunlight bounces and curves just right, off the vast dust cloud. And if you use a filter for red, such as the insert of a floppy disk, an old floppy disk or Mylar, you're filtering everything else out but the red spectrum, and oh boy, there it is, the big tail, all the moon swirls, everything. So the fact that, and people talk about this all the time, it's not on the mainstream media, huge cover-up. Well, that's the reason. It's the cover-up. Even if the cover-up drops, we're still going to have cover-up aspects. They're going to say, right, don't listen to Nancy. Nancy Leader, my name is the only name that NASA has ever said, don't listen to her. Don't listen to Nancy Leader. They're on record several times in interviews, in print, saying, don't listen. Well, who else do they finger like that? Why, if somebody is just a crazy whack, why do you have to say don't listen to them? That's obvious. Nobody right. listens to Jeffrey the Clown, for instance. So I mean that's kind of a compliment. That's like saying do listen to Nancy Leader. So
kind of like when you're looking up at the sky and you see chemtrails, what we call chemtrails, they're
right.
like aerosol being sprayed from planes very high up in the atmosphere. Sometimes those trails will crisscross at an X, and I tell people, when you see an X in the sky, that's where you should look.
Yes.
So don't listen to Nancy Leader. Okay, go to zetatalk.com. You'll find out what's going on.
Yeah. There are some places. There's a webcam in Italy that and on the poleshiftning.com. Every day this gentleman in Germany captures around 17 to 18 to 100. That's 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, and there it is. You can see this pinkish, reddish spot, and it shows the double helix. We were seeing this when it was inbound in the spring of 2003, when it was still in the night sky. People took photographs of it. A few of those were just terrific, where you can see a double helix on either side. It burrows out like shoulders, like you might have a football player rushing you, and you could see nothing but the head and the shoulders, that type of thing. And that's because it's got dominant moons that cling to it, and they can't go round and around, but they're attracted by the gravity pull of Nibiru. And they have other trash that's attracted to them, so it becomes a swirl, and they're on either side. They're equally dominant or massive, these moon swirls. So they're on either side, and they sort of trail behind in a double helix kind of pattern. And there it is on this Italy webcam, almost every day. So, and it's not the only one. There's others. There was one on the east coast of the U.S. Was it North Carolina or at sunset? That was picking this out also. So photos galore. There's a whole group of people on the poleshifting.com who are engaged in finding and making their own photos and saying, "Oh, look," So it's there, and you're not, even when you get the truth from NASA, and even when you get the truth from the mainstream media, you have to ask yourself, am I getting the whole truth? I mean, do we really know who killed JFK? I mean, that kind of thing. Do we really know? So they're always going to try to reduce panic. What they always say, to protect the guilty, the innocent will be blamed, or whatever. And so you don't know if you're getting the whole story. But one thing that Zeta Talk has been noted for is telling you the worst case. It is the worst case that you're going to get from us. It's only prophecy, it's only opinion, and until it plays out, it is just opinion and prophecy. But we're not sugarcoating it. And the reason we're not is because people deserve to be armed with the truth. And let me tell you, this is not like one day all of a sudden, whammo, you're hit with this and it's horrible. So you have to just sit there and bite your fingernails. It's going to be a situation where and Zeta Talk has laid out what they call the last weeks. Now, this is not just Zeta Talk. This is in history, that there was a long day and a long night. Jericho, the Battle of Jericho, this is in the Bible. The sun stood still for more than a day while Jericho won his battle, something like that. And then on the West Coast, as Velikovsky says, we go around the globe to the other side. The West Coast Indians describe the long night, which was crashing waves and all this stuff, but it was a long night. So according to Zeta Talk, they say it's really 5.9 days. The globe stops rotating. Now you have people hopping up and saying, "Oh, everybody would fly off into space and the gravity would be gone." Well, that's nonsense. Gravity, if anything, increases ever so slightly if you stop turning, because centrifugal force is gone. It happens gradually. You have a Concorde jet goes up in the air and it's going darn fast, but everybody doesn't become jello, when it slows down and lands, because it gradually picks up speed and it gradually slows down, and you don't even feel it. Your drink doesn't even jiggle, So it's don't panic. Now, just the 5.9 days? No. You actually have a full 2 months in which the 3 days of darkness, which is predicted, I believe, in the Bible, or it's recorded somewhere. And in addition, the Islamic hadiths report that before the disasters are all over, the sun must rise in the west for 6 days. Well, what's all that about? Well, the 3 days of darkness is when the North Pole tips away under the influence of this passing planet. This tipping process doesn't just stop. It kind of overcompensates. It keeps going, momentum. And so the North Pole is a little bit south, and yet the globe is still rotating, so that's the 6 days of sunrise west. And then it rights itself again to be in alignment with the magnetic dominant magnetic influence in the solar system, which is the sun. And no, the sun does not flip every 11 years. There is no evidence for that. That is a theory of NASA's, disproved by their own Ulysses probe, which went by and said, no, we went through a solar maximum and a solar minimum and nothing changed. And they said, oh, it must be a problem with the probe. And then they got rid of the information, but not before we all captured it and discussed it. So dominant north up, south pole down in the solar system, determined by the sun, who is the big magnet in the solar system. So we have 2 months of this, including 3 days of darkness, 6 days of sunrise west, then gradual slowing rotation for 3 weeks, and then 5.9 days of rotation. So that's a lot of time. If you're worried about when should you get in your car and dragging on all the camping gear and leave the coast and get up into the hills, you got time. And so don't panic about that. What you should be thinking about is, what do we do afterwards? Because the grid will go down and all this serious stuff. And Zeta Talk is, I'm hoping that next month, Andre, that we can talk about worst case scenario and how it ain't so bad. Like, what do you do when the soap is gone? What do you do when you run out of toilet paper? But believe me, there are solutions. You may not have thought of this, but Troubled Times, which is also hosted on my websites, had several hundred very bright people brainstorming on these issues from 1995 to 2001, and we came up with a lot of solutions, which I'm anxious to share with everybody. Houseboat living, rebuilding your shelters out of junk. You can make soap. I mean, the pioneers did that. It's just nothing but ashes and animal fat. And it works. It might be a little strong, but et cetera, So that's why people should at least investigate Zeta Talk and consider it, because they have been wrong dramatically in a couple cases. Was 2003, the pole shifts did not happen then, and the Zeta said we knew it wasn't going to. We were just trying to get George Bush to go into Iraq early and show his cards, and he did. Mm-hmm. He went in April, before the inspectors had even finished their inspections. We got to get in there. And so people
hurry up
said,
and do it.
He's in a rush. Hurry up and do it. And he did not tell the public about the pending passage, which he thought was going to happen. I can tell you my house was in and out with people from the government. Hi, I'm just Air Force. I'm just passing. Hi, come on. I just thought I'd stop in and say hi. What are you doing? And they were watching me, and I really believed it was going to happen, and I ran up credit cards like you wouldn't believe. Boy, was that a painful thing to get out of. I had to work, and it took me 6 years to pay off, and because I had to believe it. And then they would, well, she seems to think so. She's really, So otherwise, he wouldn't have done it. And another thing is the start of all these plate movements, which did start on time in Indonesia, where that part is sinking 60, 80, 40 feet, etc., and India being pushed under the Himalayas. That started in early 2011, as they predicted, but they said it was going to move along a lot faster than it did. It got real slow because the administrative force in our part of the universe, and this is the Zetas speaking, and of course this is their opinion or theory, the administrative force in this part of the universe said they wanted to give Obama more time to muster together his ability to tell people that the passage was pending and they should get braced for it. And that is still in our future, according to them, still going to happen.
Well, we were anticipating that as we put these shows together on USAEBN, and we're still, pushing forward the idea that we have time. Like you said, we do have time. There's going to be, the last weeks take quite some time, and in New Madrid, we're going to see some shakers that will increase with magnitude and frequency before that rips. I do want, we got a couple of minutes left, Nancy. I do want to flesh out a little bit about the safe locations advice tool that is on your website and how folks can find that. It's a really great tool that puts together not every spot on the planet, but most of the larger cities and countries and locations, and it breaks down if the pole shift were to happen, what would be a safe location, I guess is the best way to say it. Maybe.
Yeah. This was developed by somebody who was a Pole Shift NING member, and I know that's on the Pole Shift NING, and it's also, I think, links to that on my website. Click on Safe Locations on the left, and it fans out into more options. And it's like an interactive map, that tells you can click on your city, you can click on your country, and instead of having, you just go into Zeta Talk, and it's this page with 300 choices. And it says countries, provinces, and states, and cities, that type of thing. But so this is actually a little more user-friendly because people like to say, well, there, that's where I live, click, So another one is 7 steps where to determine, because another prediction that Zeta's made, and mind you, this is not fact but prophecy, is that because they predict that this pole shift is going to be a big crustal shift, much more so than the last one, according to Potsdam University in Germany, had Greenland moving out of the Arctic Circle south, and that's why it has so much ice. It was our last North Pole, and at the same time there were climate changes in Sub-Sahara, and Potsdam has recorded that all and said, well, there was a crustal shift, but that was slight. So the Zetas are saying this time it's going to be a 90-degree shift, and because of that, there's all this friction that heats up, and the oceans are very deep, cold water. They will heat up, and hot water takes more space than cold, and so you have rising seas, not from carbon dioxide, although we're going to have plenty more of that from burping volcanoes, but because of warmer oceans, and therefore 675 feet is the break off approximately. So the 7 steps says, where do you live? Let's see where the sea level, and this is within 2 years. It doesn't happen the moment of the pole shift. It takes time for that water to heat up, but within 2 years it'll rise. Well, it wipes out the Mississippi Valley, wipes out the Amazon Valley, Siberia, all of Russia, from except for, Moscow will be gone. It's just terrible what happens to Russia. They have to move their entire populace to the Far East, and they are in the process of doing that. To say, who takes Zeta Talk seriously? Putin, and et cetera, and the Russians do. They have moved 2 years ago already. They were moving their state offices there to the Far East, and encouraging people, giving away free land, encouraging people to be innovative and start businesses over there and grow vegetables in Kamchatka, and never mind the grizzly bears. And they're going at it great guns. They know that Zeta Talk is accurate.
Yeah, and as we get the word out to more listeners, and they share the information, and a lot of this information can be found on social media as well. And then we encourage here folks to dig down on the information and find those links and get research everything before you believe anything is kind of our mantra here at USAEBN. And if you go to zetatalk.com or poleshift.ning.com, and you dig through the links there, which are well thought out and well put up onto the site, you will learn a lot, if not have a couple more questions, which, with Zeta Talk being up since 1995, one could spend a lot of time on that website, Nancy, as I have and many of our users have.
Yeah.
Huge. And it's there to spread the information about the oncoming passage of Planet X, Nibiru, and the pole shift that it's going to bring. And that's the only, well, maybe I'm putting words into your mouth here, but that's the reason that website is there, is to inform folks who want to be prepared.
Exactly. And next month I hope to talk about, okay, so that's the bad news. Now here, what do we do about it? And
what do we do?
It's not as bad as you think, all the solutions, and I'm going to make a long list and rattle it all off and not linger much on any one of them, because you will be stunned at how many solutions there are. It's going to be fun. School is out. You don't have to punch the clock at work, and never mind your debts and trying to make the budget balance. You're going to be in good physical shape, yeah. So it's going to be like an adventure, yeah.
Excellent. Well, Nancy, thanks for your time again. Our new partnership, the Zeta report on USA Emergency Broadcasting Network, going forward, I think we'll get a lot of this information out. And like you said, too, it doesn't have to be scary if you deal with it. It's the folks that are putting their heads in the sand and decide to, party like it's 1999, and instead of paying attention to what's going on with the earth and the sky and your surroundings. We want to get through to the people that want to be prepared, and that's kind of our mission here, and I'm glad that you can be part of that and bring us forward.
Thank you.